from Psychologies magazine. Hello, hello, hello. It's Susie Walker here from Psychologies magazine, and today I am joined by the wonderful Sally Brown. Say hello to Sally Brown, who's our resident psychotherapist in terms of she devises all our brilliant tests. One of the most popular parts of the magazine. Everybody loves this part of the magazine, Sally. We love your tests that you devise. But Sally's not just she's not just a brilliant journalist, but she's also a BACP, highly qualified psychotherapist. So I feel like we're in the best hands possible. So tell us about how you design the tests. How on earth do you do that? Because every month I go, oh my God, this is so great. And I go, oh, that's so true about me. How do you do it?
Okay.
How do you manage to do it?
Well, the actual process and the system is a little bit of a secret that I'm not going to divulge. And it's something that I've been doing these tests now since I think we started about 2016 when you approached me. And I've really kind of evolved the process since then. So I've got it to a well-oiled machine now, but basically the inspiration for the answers comes from my practice, my clinical practice. It comes from what people bring me, what I hear in my room. I never use real life case histories, obviously, because confidentiality in psychotherapy is the most important thing, but it's just informed by those real life issues, challenges, thinking processes, unhelpful beliefs that I see time and time again sitting opposite me in the chair. So that informs the types of answers that you come to. But essentially, it's very broad brushstroke, and we know that personality is not like that. We know we all have individual differences, and there are nuances. And, no test can take those into account unless it's super, super, super detailed. But this is a chance. I think this is just a chance to sort of pause and actually self-reflect, and also just think about yourself for a few minutes while you're doing it. And even if it just triggers a couple of things to make you think, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that, but maybe that's true. And maybe I need to do some thinking on that. Then I think that's a kind of useful time. But they are supposed to be quite lighthearted as well. It's supposed to be quite fun.
That's what I love. Yeah, that's what I really, really love. And this month, we're talking about self-compassion, and you've written a whole piece about why you're so hard on yourself. So, Sally, let me just ask you that. We're writing about self-compassion today. Our whole dossier is about how to be kinder to ourselves, how to champion ourselves. Why are we so hard on ourselves? What's going on?
Yeah, well, there are lots of theories, and women in particular are really prone to having a really vocal inner critic. Lots of things written about it, and I feel as though women also, they're very kind of emotionally intelligent about this. They know their inner critic inside out. But, in what we call attachment theory in therapy, it often comes from the carer, the main carer. And I think that's inadvertent, and I think a lot of the time messages can come through from really, really loving, caring parents who perhaps will subconsciously, by the way they're praising you, just instill messages that you have to be a certain way, and that certain things aren't good enough or acceptable in you. And that can then translate into a critical voice. Often clients will say to me when I ask them about their voice, whose voice is it? And they'll say, a person, it's my dad, or it's a teacher at school. But sometimes it's not a real person, and they can't pin down the source of it. But with all of these, it's kind of it's a form of defense. And with all of them, they do serve a purpose originally when they kind of installed in your programming, as it were. And that perhaps they just helped you feel like you were following some sort of rules that made you acceptable to the people who cared for you and you cared for most. But then you reach a point in your life where they've just outstayed their usefulness, their welcome, and they're actually now causing problems rather than helping. But it can be really hard to let go of. And what I hear from clients often is still that conviction, that secret conviction that it's a good thing. Being hard on yourself is a good thing, even if on a cognitive level they're saying all the right things, and they're saying, yeah, now I've got to be kind to myself. I know all of that. But actually, there's this really deep down resistance to letting go of it. and a sense that, yeah, I believe everyone else should be kind to themselves, but I don't deserve that. I deserve, I need a hard taskmaster, or I'm just going to do nothing. And that's a common fear. I'm going to do nothing. But I think why it's
my fear. Yeah, it's totally my
yeah.
fear that if I didn't have a critical inner voice, that I would never get out of bed and I just sit there eating chocolate all day.
Yeah, I know. But isn't that just like the craziest thing to believe? It's that so many of us believe that. And but I think that what we've achieved, and a lot of people who have a very inner critic are quite high achievers, but in my experience, they've achieved what they've achieved despite the critical voice, not because of it. So, and when the critical voice is removed, they actually achieve more. And actually, I can, from a personal perspective, that is certainly true in my case. I finally became awake to my critical voice and let go of it through 2 years of therapy, which I had as part of my training as a therapist. And it was life transforming for me. It changed everything, and it has done ever since. It was a slow process, and it was, well, it's allowed me to take more risks, because I think of the inner critic as like it's the equivalent of being followed around by a bully all day, who just subtly or overtly undermines your every move. You know, why did you do that? You can't do that. You'll mess up. You'll just look stupid. For goodness sake, get a grip. All of those undermine, and we wouldn't tolerate that. Obviously, hopefully, we would, get rid of that person in our life 24 hours. But we do that with an inner critic. It's the same effect. So it keeps us small, and it squashes us down, and it makes risks even scarier, because if you're going to face, you're going to have to deal with that backlash that comes from yourself if you mess up, in terms of, it's going to impact on your mood, you're going to feel really bad because you're going to say all these bad things to yourself, then you're going to limit what you do. It also limits the learning, I think, because we all mess up. We mess up all the time. I mess up probably on a daily basis. And but if your response to messing up, or just not doing something as well as you want to, is you're a loser, you're pathetic, you're so weak, you can't concentrate, and all of these things, which I hear all the time in my therapy room, it was quite shocking to hear what people say to themselves, then there's no learning from that. There's no improving from that. But if you take a compassionate approach, and one of the myths of self-compassion is just about letting yourself off the hook. It's not about saying, oh, they're there, never mind, it's okay. It's actually about saying, right, okay, that didn't go as well as planned or you wanted to. What went on? What happened? Let's look at what happened. Let's look at where there can be some room for, you could do something differently like next time, or you could learn something. There may not be any learning. It might just be circumstances. And that's another thing. It's about attributing, not just taking on the blame or yourself, attributing responsibility where it lies, and taking in external factors and things beyond our control. But when you can learn from a situation, you can improve. And I think that was one of the most liberating things for me, was letting go of that narrative of, oh, I'm somehow not as good, or not as talented, or just not as worthy as other people. But this is like a deep secret I keep to myself. And I somehow have managed to achieve despite this. But it's really just sort of, seat of my pants stuff, skin of my teeth all the time. By letting go of that narrative, and actually just saying to myself, look, I'm okay. I'm doing well in some things, not so well in other things, but that's kind of normal. And taking the shame and the judgment out of it, you can actually just look at it from a very rational point of view and go, okay, if I'm not doing this well, is it because this isn't the best use of my skills and talent? Do I need to change my direction? Or is it some way that some improvements I can make? Who can help me on this? How can I learn more skills? So
I just love what you said. I just think that is absolutely spot on. So it's not about just saying, oh, it's okay to be, because sometimes you do get it wrong, really badly wrong, or you're not as good as as you think you want to be, or you aspire to be. So I love that idea. I love that idea of that gentle way. It's almost, and we say at Psychologies, it's taking it from your inner critic to your inner coach. So what an inner coach would do, say, okay,
absolutely.
cool, that happened, and then right, what's to happen to, and as you say, is it about you trying to do something that's really not your skill set? Is it something you want to learn? And if not, how can you? Yeah, I mean, I love it. I love it. What you just said, really good. But perfectionism seems to be something that our readers just get really. It's not mine. I'm not a perfectionist, but I see my readers literally. And my team. Thank God, I've got a team of perfectionists. Thank God. But they're so worried about the detail and getting it right. How do we get the right balance with that?
Yeah, perfection is really tricky, and I think people quite often mix up high standards with perfectionism. And it's absolutely fine to have high standards. The difference is with perfectionism is almost like an invisible bar that we will never quite reach. And it's on the increase, which I think is really interesting. There's a big study that came out in 2007 by Dr. Thomas Curran at University of Bath that found that a certain type of perfectionism, because there's actually different types of perfectionism, which I didn't know until I read this study. I thought it was really interesting. But a type of perfectionism called socially prescribed perfectionism, it has gone up by 33% in young people in particular. He attributes it to social media because it's about being seen. It's about being seen in a certain way. And now that we have more ways of comparing ourselves, how you're seen is more important than ever. But he also attributes it to the change in our schooling system and the focus on grades, the focus on, it's almost like achieving and on being better and all the time also has probably had an impact on that. So, and I think perfectionism and self-compassion are really linked, because a lot of people will say, mentally say to themselves, yeah, I'll be kind to myself when I've reached a certain standard, or when I'm perfect, and then I'll love myself, and then I'll accept myself. But when will that time come? When will you ever reach that perfection? It's such a woolly standard to set for yourself. You'll never get there. So it limits you in terms, you're always on that treadmill. You're always feeling like you're not quite there. You're not quite good enough. You're not quite acceptable enough. And ironically, self-acceptance is the first key for change. Once we accept ourselves as we are, then that's when we'll find more change. And that's a really tricky concept to get your head around, and it took me a while. But I think I finally get it now, which is because it's about the approach we were talking about earlier. It's about being realistic, having your eyes wide open about yourself, but in a non-judgmental way, about accepting who you are, flaws and all, because we all have flaws. And rather than seeing yourself as a kind of work in progress and which bits do I have to improve, it's about saying, okay, well, how do I make the most of the talents that I've got and the things that I love doing, and doing more of those.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're talking about here is so fundamental to so much of the work we do at Psychologies. And without that bedrock of self-acceptance, our industry can get a little bit tricky. I've fallen into the track of self-development and self-improvement of I'll be happy when, which is, it's great to set goals and all of these things, but this idea that there's some place called there that I'm going to get to that will make me happy, and this industry can really, really feed that. So I think almost when we're coming into the journey of understanding ourselves and liking ourselves and valuing ourselves, as you say, if we could make the bedrock of that self-acceptance, I think we'll save ourselves a lot of pain. But as you say, it's a tricky one. Hang on, we're into self-development and self-improvement, but we've got to start with self-acceptance. But I love the idea of, okay, it's almost like an edit of yourself. It's like, okay, this is who I am. This is who I am currently. This is, what I love about myself. These are the things. I think for me, it's like having a sense of humor about the things about me, perhaps not as great as be. And I think when I found my sense of, I was a little bit earnest, I think, for many years. And now I'm kind of a little bit more gentle with my humor around this, because it's like, oh, I've tried so many times to learn to cook, for example. You know, it doesn't work. Anyway, in terms of self-acceptance as a concept, it's great. But in terms of why self-acceptance and self-compassion, why is this going to help us with success and happiness? It's not just about peace of mind, is it? It will help us actually get to the very things that we're trying to do with perfectionism and inner critic and driving ourselves and whipping ourselves. But when we use self-acceptance and self-compassion, how does that work? How does that help us grow?
It's interesting. Because one of the biggest researchers in self-compassion is Kristin Neff from University of Texas, and she's done some really interesting research which showed that in terms of confidence, building confidence, self-compassion is more important than self-esteem. So self-esteem tends to relate to external circumstances. You feel good because you've got a certain job, or someone's told you look good. So that's very variable and dependent on what's happening around you. Whereas self-compassion builds that confidence we were talking about earlier, the confidence to take risks because you know you've got your own inner coach backing you, the confidence that comes from self-acceptance and self-knowledge, but at the same time being okay to try new things. So it is really rooted in success, and there has been some really interesting research that shows that people who are most self-compassionate are the most successful in reaching goals like losing weight and overcoming addiction problems. So that's why it's often rooted in a lot of increasingly a lot of addiction programs will talk about self-compassion. There's a great form of therapy called compassionate mind therapy that's been created by Professor Paul Gilbert at University of Derbyshire. That's really, if anybody has not come across his book, Compassionate Mind, I'd really recommend it. It's a life-changing book. So
okay, so I've lost you, Sally. You've frozen. So what I would say to everybody, hopefully Sally will come back, but we're talking, this month is Psychologies, how to champion yourself. We've got a lot of how-to around how we do that. How do we champion ourselves? How do we become more self-compassionate? A kind of a step-by-step guide. Sally was mentioning Kristin Neff there around, our wonderful dossier was written by Nicola Harker this month, who went on a course that was run by Kristin Neff, and that was the thing that actually transformed her life. Nicola, who's a coach now, was at the time a GP and ran her in a family. So it was very difficult for her. I think we've lost Sally. I think what happens is our computers overheat, and this is very hot. Where we are in the world, it's incredibly hot. And what I've been doing is I'm resting my laptop on the lasagna to keep it cool. Anyway, Kristin Neff inspired this dossier this month, and written by Nicola Harker, who was completely transformed that. But a couple of things that she said, some tools for you, is instead of being your worst critic, is what would you say to a friend? So you wouldn't harshly say to a friend, oh, get over yourself, or sort yourself out, or you're not good enough. You make them a cup of tea and you help them and you support them. So maybe the first thing you can do is, what would you say to a friend? The next step is to practicing noticing your emotions and simply being with them. So in terms of, if you notice, yesterday I noticed I was jealous. So rather than trying to escape from my jealousy, I was kind of noticing that. And then I started, that took me to a kind of role of, why am I comparing myself to somebody else? And that took me to a really new place. And then I was able to journal about that and maybe come up to a different conclusion, rather than just reacting to the emotions that I was feeling. And the third thing is what we've already talked about, is find your inner coach. So I know we've got the new course at the moment called Create the Life You Want, and a major part of that is find your inner coach, create your inner coach. So personify kind of that kind of good fairy, Glinda, whoever you want to call it, who's telling you good things about yourself, how you can help yourself, how you can support yourself, and do it that way. So that's 3 things that you can actually do that will help your self-compassion. I know Sally was going to cover these things, but we've lost her in the heat. So what would you say to a friend? Try and stay with your emotions and kind of notice and see where that is. Rather than trying to escape that, see what you can learn from that. What are your emotions trying to tell you that? Why are you trying to compare yourself to someone else? Where do you not feel value? Why do you not feel valuable? And then, okay, well, how do you value yourself? When I went through that exercise yesterday, it's like, looking at my own value and how I value myself really helped me to see the world differently. And the third thing was find your inner coach. So, rather than constantly be in contact with your inner critic, find your inner coach. Sally, I'm sure you'll be watching this. Oh, she's just coming back to say hello again. Hi, Sally. Hello. Sally, I was just doing tips. Did your computer completely go? No. Hello, Sally. You did what I did the other day. My computer completely overheated, and I cut off in the middle of my Facebook Live. Anyway, Sally, what I was just finishing there was I was giving 3 tips about how to be self-compassionate.
Yeah.
And one was how to. So it was just in the dossier this month, which is based on Kristen Neff, which is what you were talking about. So the 3 things were: what would you say to a friend? Try and stay with your emotions, and rather than reject them or start beating yourself up, start noticing. Saying I was feeling really jealous yesterday. I got a new boyfriend, Sally, and I was feeling really jealous. And I was trying to notice what was going on for me and why I was comparing myself to somebody else and that kind of thing. And that took me to a new place of asking myself, how do I define my own value, especially in the which was really interesting. And then the third piece was finding your inner coach, which we talked about earlier. So for you, Sally, before we're going to go now, but are there any top tips around how to be self-compassionate?
I think practical tips are really helpful, because people often say that, I know I shouldn't have an inner critic anymore. I know it's not helpful, but how do I get rid of it? And it's not easy, but it can be done. But some practical things you can start with, I've just written down a few things, is start the day with an affirmation. Such as today I offer myself self-compassion. Today I befriend the person I already am. Just really simple, something that works for you. So that's yourself in the morning. I would say get more into a mindful habit if you're not already. So 3 times a day, just pause, focus on your breathing, and just watch what your thoughts are doing. And you might be surprised at how critical they are, and see if you can let that out. I would say if you catch yourself slipping in self-critical mode, just stop and ask yourself, how does this help you? If you're, it can be difficult to differentiate between helpful thinking, critical thinking. Check in with the feelings. If it's creating stressful, unpleasant feelings in you, it's not helpful thinking. Let it go. I would also advise a certain type of meditation called metta meditation, which people might be really familiar with, called loving kindness meditation. It really works for me. You wish yourself well, and then you wish a difficult person in your life well, and then you wish someone you love well, and then you send out love and compassion to the rest of the world. And it has a series of steps. You can find lots of guided them on YouTube for free, and there's lots of them out there. But that really helps if you do that afterwards. And I think if you do that regularly, I think there are actually studies that say that the more often you do that, you can actually increase your self-compassion. That's probably about it.
That's wonderful, Sally. That's absolutely fantastic. So interesting. I loved what you said about the growth, using self-compassion for growth. I love that idea. And also the piece about self-acceptance, which is, I think, in our industry, sometimes we miss that piece, in the kind of striving for better, live your best life, which, I totally believe in, but at the same time, it has to come from this very forgiving, softer place of that starts with self-acceptance. This is the wonderful.
Absolutely.
This is the wonderful Sally Brown, who's a psychotherapist on our wonderful magazine Psychologies, and who devises all of our tests. So you can commune with Sally every month in the test section of our dossier. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today, and lots of love, lots of compassion.
That's great.
Bye bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye.